Hi, friends, nice to meet you all again. I just want to share something with you which God's put in my heart regarding prioritizing God and obviously keeping Him in the right place in our lives in terms of our situation, in terms of whatever circumstances we go through, and knowing that God's always there and obviously prioritizing to be the main person in our lives in terms of who we go to, in terms of who we know we can trust on, depending on whatever comes in our way. God spoke to me through Matthew chapter 14 verses 22 onwards. In terms, this was a story where the disciples were actually in the middle of the sea and there's a storm that hits them and they panic, and then suddenly when Jesus walks on the water and comes, and they start seeing Jesus as a ghost. And it's just an insight that God gave me, which I want to share with you, which I really feel will help you guys as well in terms of trusting God in whatever circumstances we go through. If we read from verses 23 onwards in Matthew chapter 14, it says, "And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary." Now I was thinking about this situation because just literally before this was the miracle of feeding the 5,000, and just after that this is happening place, because we see in verse 22 it says immediately, which was immediately after the miracles of the feeding 5,000. It says immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. So I was thinking about this because Jesus is actually getting the disciples to go to the other side before him, but Jesus doesn't go with them, but instead he goes to pray by himself up the mountains. Now this made me confused because we think if Jesus was obviously in the boat, then there wouldn't have been a wind, there wouldn't have been a storm which the disciples faced and whatever. But if Jesus is the person who's telling them to go on the other side and he knows this is going to happen, I was kind of surprised why Jesus didn't go with the disciples at that point. But what God spoke to me through was Jesus was trying to build their faith up in terms of knowing who God was. Now literally just before this, as we saw, he fed the 5,000. It was a crazy miracle that they saw, and they were full of faith. And it says immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat, which meant he didn't want them to just be in the comfort zone of just receiving a miracle and be like, you know what, it's all good, we got Jesus with us. So he said, go to the other side and I will be shortly with you. That's what he said. And then they started traveling, and they were going on the boat, and suddenly we see that when the evening came. So this really spoke to me because sometimes we get so much in our comfort zone. Now the disciples clearly knew in terms of what they were doing, in terms of how obviously they needed to row the boat, in terms of how they needed to sail. They were fishermen, so they were very experienced in terms of what they were doing in their lives. So it was just another thing to them. They were just sailing across all night. It was a daytime, it was good, but it's when the evening came. Now in our lives, we sometimes just to get too much in our comfort zone and we think everything is just going fine, and because when the daylight is there, when the miracle's happening, when Jesus was feeding the 5,000, we're like the disciples were like, yeah, we're full of faith, we're all good. But it's when Jesus puts us to the test of faith, because he wants to increase our faith. He wants to increase, and he does it through the help of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And he just wants us to build ourselves even more spiritually. So when he allows certain situations to come in our life, that's when the evening strikes, when the daylight starts going down in your life, and you suddenly feel like, what's going on? And suddenly there's a storm that comes their way. And then you feel like, okay, where is Jesus now? But what I really want you to know is Jesus was the one who sent the disciples into the storm. Not into the storm, sorry, but Jesus was the one who sent the disciples actually to sail across. But what they failed to understand, the disciples, was that they failed to focus Jesus in their hearts. Because regardless of whether he was with them physically on the boat or not, if Jesus was really in their heart, when Jesus came after, they wouldn't have seen him as a ghost, because the only reason was their focus and their vision and everything they saw was so much just in the storm and how they were gonna row by themselves, use their own strength and everything just by themselves, and their heart was so focused on the storm, and they lost the focus on Jesus. And that's all it was. The faith was not there because they didn't have the focus on Jesus. And suddenly we see that when Jesus came after to rescue them and obviously to build their faith up, we see them saying, "Oh, look, it's a ghost." So they don't identify Jesus, who were they just with a while ago, and who he just performed a miracle, a crazy miracle of feeding the 5,000 with only a little bit of food. And they saw all this, but when the storm came, they couldn't identify who Jesus was because their focus was on the storm. And that's when the evening strikes, your focus changes. So I just want to encourage you right now, if you're going through a difficult situation in your life and you have God in your life, and even if you don't have Jesus in your life, I just want to let you know that, whatever you're going through is a test of faith. Just have faith that God is going to take you through, and have faith that He's the only one who can actually allow you and who can help you, who can assist you to pass the storm, because we cannot do it through our own strength. So I want to bless you guys. Stay strong. Even though we might fail sometimes, even though we might see like we don't have enough faith, but just really know that God's in control and Jesus is always there when you need Him. So never lose faith. Focus on Jesus, not the problems, not the storms in your life. Just have your focus on the person who can calm the storms. God bless you.